All right. Good afternoon. Welcome back. And let's go ahead and get started for today. So I have several updates and just things to get you all on the same page about with regard to where we're at in the quarter, some of the stuff that we have to do that's coming up as we approach basically the last 2.5 weeks or so. The first thing that I wanted to chat a little bit about was, of course, the email that I sent you all through Canvas on Monday. As you all know, last week I was at a conference, Western States Communication Association in Portland. And so last Monday, I was driving back from Portland back to LaGrange. And so as I was on I-84, about 30 miles east of the Dalles, I got through a patch of black ice. My car started spinning out of control, lost control of the car. It ended up going into the ditch on the side of the road and started going up over the hill on that side. And the car flipped over with myself and my dog inside. So I was hanging upside down by my seatbelt. I was able to get out of the vehicle. Both my dog and I got medical checkups, and you're fine, we're uninjured. But that was a pretty awful experience. There were about 3 or 4 other cars that had also flipped or crashed on the side of the road right around where I was. It was also weird because I've gone on I-84 dozens of times and never run into anything like that. So that was pretty awful. Yesterday, I actually drove back to LaGrange. A police officer drove my dog and I to the Dalles, where we stayed Monday night. And then we headed back yesterday in the tiny little rental car that they had available. So it's been an interesting past couple days following that conference and everything else. And again, we're fine, but as a result of everything that's happened, it has put me a little bit behind on doing stuff. So I've been in the process of catching up on emails, correspondence, contact with people, along with rating. So just bear with me as I'm trying to get back acclimated into everything else. Also, just to know that I'm going to be pushing back this week's quiz, just to give you some extra time. I'll have that up later today, and then I'll have that to you by next Wednesday. So, I'll do my best to catch up on some of that stuff. We were originally going to have a virtual assignment on Monday, since we weren't meeting face to face, but I knew that first of all, it was President's Day. Second of all, you all had, a lot of things going on in other classes and stuff to catch up on. So I didn't think it was fair to add on just another assignment to do. So I got rid of that requirement and just give you the chance to use the day off to catch up and do what we needed to do. So we're picking up today on some of the stuff that we left off on last Friday and getting into the new stuff for this week. So just wanted to let you know where we're at in the quarter, some of the things that we have left to do and so on. This week, we'll be getting into what it means to have group motivation. How do we inspire members of the group to participate, to work together, to solve issues and conflicts that might come up. We'll also be using time to this week to help you in preparation for your small group observation assignment. And again, it's coming up and will be due on March 6th. So again, take some time this week. If you haven't already done so, I definitely recommend that you use some time today to think through when and where you're planning to do the observation. If by the end of this week, you're not sure or don't have a plan on how to do the observation, let me know, and I will try to help to link you up with a meeting that you can do for that. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention is that the last full week of classes during week 10 are the dates where I'll have folks present their observations. So I'll ask you to come in and present on those days. I sent out a Google form where you should indicate your availability and preference on those days. So please fill out that Google form if you haven't already, and I'll use that to send out the schedule, as well as let people know about conflicts or ways to work around those conflicts. And then also, if you in addition to those things, I had a couple questions. We're not doing any sort of meeting on the final exam day. Instead, that'll be an opportunity for you to catch up on remaining assignments before I have to submit grades. So just as you're planning for the last few weeks, just some things to So we had a smaller group last Friday, but I do want to do a quick refresher on things that we went over during last week's class meeting, including our discussion of groupthink and some of the examples that we used of the challenges in small group participation, some of the things that make for good and effective teams, and some of the elements of leadership styles. Again, that small group observation essay is coming up. Let me know if you need help as you're working through that. And I think some of the stuff that we'll talk about for today on group motivation will be directly helpful as you prepare for that. So last class, we talked about this idea, right? That groupthink is a major problem that comes up when we avoid having the ability of people from different points of view and perspectives from openly speaking out or addressing the problem. One example that I gave, right, is that if you're trying to hire a person for a job and you have like 2 finalist candidates, everybody wants to hire person A, but you kind of want to hire person B. If you're the one person that sort of disagrees, right, you might not feel comfortable sharing your perspective. That is, you're more willing to cede to the group's ideas or preferences despite your individual concern, right? And groupthink gets at the idea that we might not feel comfortable or able or willing to share our own opinions and instead go along with the group. The problem with that, right, is the logical fallacy of an appeal to popularity. Just because the majority of people believe something does not mean that that thing is true or correct. In fact, when group members reinforce each other in that way, it becomes a bit of a feedback loop. You might think about the classic metaphor, right, of like, or simile, like lemmings off of a cliff, where lemmings see other lemmings jumping off the cliff and they do it too. That's a problem in groupthink, that we don't feel comfortable sharing our ideas because we self-censor, right, and block out our own points of view. And it also brings about this illusion of invulnerability. We think that, oh, we have the good ideas. We're not doing groupthink. We're open, when in reality, it could be happening. We looked at examples like the Challenger space disaster, Bay of Pigs invasion, as some classic examples, and Swiss Air, classic examples of groupthink in action, where people died because the space shuttle blew up, because scientists had concerns, but they weren't taken seriously when they brought them forward. Talked about some of the ways to combat groupthink. One suggestion I gave was giving people the option to write out or express their opinion ahead of time before a group meeting. Also, to play devil's advocate, to have time for people to think about a decision. People are more willing to go along with the group if they don't have the time to develop their own opinion on the topic. And again, to encourage an open expression of disagreed views. We also talked about different types of leaders and some of the strategies that are necessary to make good leaders, right? The idea, kind of like a conductor, right? A leader can be somebody that helps to amplify and support the voices of people, or as a more kind of detached type of leader. As you're thinking about your small group observation, you might observe how your group member leader is taking on a different role that impacts the group. So for today, we'll be talking about motivation. Again, the idea of what compels us to participate in groups, some of the actions that motivate our behavior, and also some theories that help to explain group motivation on the whole. I think there's a couple reasons why group motivation will be really useful for you as you think about your own small groups that you're a part of, and you think about the small group observation assignment. One of the big reasons, right, is that if you are a member of a group, there's a good chance that you have struggled with, or other group members have struggled with the issue of motivation, right? We've all been a part of a group at some point in our lives. Maybe it was for our college or like high school class, where we had a group assignment. And we've had people who haven't been motivated, who have ghosted, who have not participated, or contributed to the project and have brought everybody in, right? That can be a really big problem. Or maybe you yourself have been in a position where you haven't contributed or participated in the group in the way that you wish you could have. So group motivation is a really big part of that in figuring out how everybody can work together effectively. Similarly, if you find yourself in a leadership role, right, you're taking on some type of position that involves overseeing the behavior and actions of the group, you are going to want to make sure that members of the group are motivated. If you find yourself as a supervisor, right, and you're trying to get all of your workers and people together in working through a day, Motivation is a crucial way that that happens. We might think back to the different theories of communication and human behavior. Theories X, Y, and Z. Remember that theory X is pessimistic. People are motivated by just getting the basic resources that they need, things like food, water, shelter, safety, and all of that, and go to work because they have to. Theory Y says people are motivated to work and to participate. They want to do a good job. And theory Z is somewhere in between. People want to do a good job, but they also feel like they need to balance some of their social needs. They need to feel like they're a part of a team or a group. So wherever your perspective comes in, motivation is a crucial way that we can get people engaged. So motivation, right? If we say that you lack motivation or that you're not very motivated, right? It oftentimes means that you don't really have much of a reason to do something. So maybe, you need to go exercise, you need to go to the gym, but you say, you know what, I don't feel very motivated, right? Motivation is about having a reason or a purpose to do something. So if somebody describes you as highly motivated or somebody that takes the initiative, you're typically the kind of person that feels the sort of need or urge to do a task or to do something well, right? So motivation is important. It suggests there is a reason that compels us to act or to do something, right? And as we'll talk a little bit about, that reason could be a lot of different things. It could be that we see a reward or thing that we get as a result of putting in the work, or we could see doing something that's meaningful to us as its own reward, right? For instance, my dad has always loved doing jigsaw puzzles. And it's a kind of intrinsic motivation. He likes to put the puzzles together, not because he gets money or gets a reward for doing so, but just because it's fun to do. Collaboration, right, is this idea that when you're part of a team or part of a small group, that you're putting in work together as group members that goes beyond what people in the group on their own would do, right? So that it's more than the sum of its parts. We might think back, for instance, to the party, right? And the way that you all integrated things like a piñata, like a kind of like scavenger hunt type activity, and other ideas that you all put together as a group in a way that you might not have come up with when you were just on your own. So collaboration suggests that by working together, we can reach these unique solutions to problems. Right, so at the heart of motivation is this sort of question of what motivates or drives us to accomplish the tasks and do the things. And there's a lot of different ways you can think about what motivation is, how motivation matters, and how we can be motivated or motivate others to do things. So there's a lot of factors and I think considerations that we can think about that compel us toward motivation, right? One of the biggest ones is this idea of factors that impact the process. So we might think about persuasion, right? Persuasion about the use of communication and influence to guide other people to act, right? If you're doing a persuasive speech, you're compelling somebody to change their behavior or action. Influence, right, suggests the degree to which people have some level of authority or control that can affect others, right? That's why we hear the term influencer being used to describe people that use social media to do things like advertise product. And then we talk about motivation. So individual and group receptiveness, right? If somebody is receptive, it means that they're open to getting feedback, to getting criticism, to getting some type of response. So somebody is motivated if they are receptive to feedback. Hey, you're doing a good job. There are a few things that I could have you do to do a little bit better, or there are a few things that I would encourage you to fix up for next time. So if you're working on a project or working on a job and you feel like you're receptive to feedback, that's a huge factor that will make you more motivated, that you're willing to take in that feedback from the group. Surrounding circumstances, right, are a really big thing that can impact our motivation too. For instance, if we find ourselves working in a really loud space where there's a ton of noise and a ton of distractions, that surrounding physical space is definitely going to make it more difficult to stay on task and to stay focused. If you're somebody that is, really working and struggling to make ends meet, is concerned about some of those immediate needs, then those circumstances are going to make it a lot more difficult to focus on a task. Physical conditions play a really big role too. So we've talked about how when you're working together in a group, maybe you're leading a group discussion or participation, it's a good idea to offer things like regular breaks, maybe to offer snacks, to offer easy access to food and water, right? All of those crucial things, because based on somebody's physical state, right, they're not going to be as motivated if they're really concerned about getting to use the restroom or doing some of those crucial things for survival and well-being. So how people are doing, if they're getting those kind of basic needs met at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, basic food, water, shelter, all of those things, that plays a really big role in motivation too. Another key idea here is people's attitudes or beliefs toward a particular task, right? So for instance, if somebody is working in a group and they get a task that's like, you know, trying to put things in alphabetical order, and it's super easy, right? It's a very low stress task. You have a ton of time to do it. Your group's not going to be very motivated. It requires very little effort and energy to accomplish the thing that your group needs to do. On the other extreme, if your group finds itself with a task that's really challenging, you're going to feel overwhelmed. Maybe it's outside of your skill set. For instance, you're asking a group to design an entirely new website from scratch, right? And nobody knows how to do web design. That might be a really difficult situation in which the group members feel hopeless and not able to do what they need to do. So ideally, a good attitude toward a task is one that has this middle ground, where it's a challenge, it takes some effort and work to resolve the issue, but it feels like there's the power, the time, the resources, the ability to solve that problem. So attitudes toward a task definitely play a really big role. So when it comes to understanding some of the ways that we behave in a group, there's a few different theories and types of theories that can help us to make sense of and trace this experience. These can be divided into content and process-oriented theories. Content-oriented theories are dealing with this idea of rewards and reinforcement for behavior. I'm curious, how many people have heard of Pavlov's dog? Heard that concept before. Yes, a couple of folks like Kenna. Right, so this is a theory like in psychology and sociology, right? And Pavlov was a behavioral social theorist. And what he did was right before he would feed a dog, he would ring a bell, right? The bell symbolizing that it was time to eat, that it was time for food. And what ended up happening is that over time, right, through classical conditioning, every time Pavlov would ring the bell, the dog would salivate. The dog would get excited, and the dog knew that food was coming, right? Or if you're like my dog, once she learned to shake, she started like trying to paw at you all the time and do extra shakes to get treats every time. So it's an example, right, of content motivation that, you know, you shake because you know you'll get a treat if you do it, you'll get reinforced. And in the same way, right, if you do a good job on a group project, for instance, your group members work really hard, you study, you practice, you work together, and you know as a result, you'll get a good grade, right? That deals with this process method of reinforcement, or the content method of reinforcement, rather. Process is more about explaining the different factors and motivations that all come together to influence the ways that people in a group behave. That is, in this process approach, you're looking at a variety of different things. Maybe your group is not working together very well. Maybe you're in a study group and you didn't really get much done. You look at all the factors that went into it. Well, you know, 2 people didn't show up. Everybody was really tired and hungry. They just had an exam that came in earlier. There was like a group of 2 people that were just chatting and getting off topic all the time. People were checking their phones all the time, and so on, right? So content deals more with, again, reinforcing behavior. Process deals more with understanding the sort of web of factors that influence how the members of the group behave. Additionally, there's these ideas of differentiation and integration, right? So when we're joining a group, as we've talked a little bit about in regards to culture, right, and influence on a group, we're coming in with an array of experiences. Just think, for instance, about COVID-19, right, and the way that we each come in with some very different experiences over the past couple of years. Maybe you were working, right, completely remotely, or maybe you were a frontline worker, for instance, a hospital worker who had to actively work with and engage with possible exposure to COVID. So as you're working together as a team, right, the past couple of years may have substantially changed the ways in which your members behaved and acted and had to deal with issues. Whereas integration deals with the idea that members of the group were able to work together and find similarities. So integration is sort of the opposite. It allows members of the group to find similarities between one another. We both had to deal with COVID these past couple of years. We both had to deal with people that were remote. We both had to use Zoom, which we hated and didn't have fun using, but learned how to use it effectively. So over the process of motivation, right, you find unique ways that you differ in your experience, but also similarities that help your group members become more motivated and understand one another through that kind of unified experience. Kind of in a similar note, pictured here is the social theorist, Frederick Herzberg. So Herzberg came up with this idea of two-factor theory. And two-factor theory suggests that we're motivated by a couple different things. Motivators, right, are positive things that allow us to do something. For instance, you know that in the past, if you spend 6 hours cramming for a biology exam, then you do well in the exam, right? So that's a motivator, that you will get a good thing, like a good grade, if you put in the work. Hygiene sounds a little bit weird, right? It's not about washing your hands. It's about the idea that if you do not have something, you feel negative things, right? If something is taken away, stuff goes a lot worse. I'll give you an example. If you in the morning, right, are getting up and taking a shower, and your roommate has used all the hot water, you have to take this like cold, uncomfortable, icy shower, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel frustrated, annoyed because you lost access to that warmth from taking a shower that you needed. That would be an example, I guess, fittingly in this instance, of hygiene, right? That we feel upset or hurt when something is gone. The idea, for instance, that if we don't complete a project, then we don't get paid, might be an example of that as well. So in the same way, you can think about it as kind of like carrots and sticks. We want to get something for doing a task. We also know that if we don't accomplish a task, that we'll experience the loss of something that might be important for us. We might get fired. So both of those things together helps to explain what compels us to act. So another, I think, key idea, one that I think connects pretty closely to maybe some of the activities or groups that you're a part of, deals with some of the different rewards and motivation. To give you an example, when I was in high school, I started to do speech and debate my senior year because I was starting to apply to colleges and get all that stuff together. And I was told, hey, you need extracurriculars. If you join the speech and debate team, you get an extracurricular. That'll make you more competitive for applying to colleges. So I joined the team, not because I was really that interested in speech and debate, but because I was looking for an extracurricular. It fit the bill and it would serve the function of getting me into a college. However, once I got started, once I went to my first tournament and got third place in the novice division, I got really excited. I started to really enjoy it. I enjoyed the process of putting together arguments, of presenting in front of a group, of researching and developing a speech. I did a whole speech where I compared Tiger Woods to a tragic hero in literature. It was kind of silly, but anyway, I got really excited for doing it, right? So in this way, what started as an extrinsic motivation, I wanted a scholarship, became an intrinsic motivation, that I became interested in it for its own sake. The same way, right? If you're involved in a sport or activity, like golf, you might be only doing it because you're on scholarship, you're on the team, you know, you get funded for doing it. Or you might do it because you really enjoy it. You find the activity fun, rewarding, interesting, so on. In the same way, you might think about rewards as a really big aspect of how groups participate. That intrinsic means that we value the activity as an end to itself. That you like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, not because you get the reward of the finished puzzle, but because you enjoy the process, you find it interesting, you find yourself learning and engaging your peers, right? If you play Wordle, right, that's pretty intrinsic. You like kind of playing and teasing with your brain. I guess there's some extrinsic motivation of like, you know, sharing your score on social media, but most of the time it's an intrinsic. And again, extrinsic is more that something is a means to an end. So you enjoy the activity because it gets you, you know, your scholarship and helps you get through college. So in that situation, the reward is that you get for doing the thing is what matters. So that also ties again to theory X and theory Y. Theory Y would be a lot more intrinsically focused, the idea that people want to do a good job on their own. Theory X is more extrinsically motivated, that people want to do a good job because then they'll get paid. Right? So rewards matter too in thinking about what compels and motivates people. Ideally, in a good small group, you would have people who are more extrinsically motivated to accomplish a task. So what I want to have us do now is I will break you all off into 4 smaller groups. And what I want you to do is take the time to look through. It's in this week's reading, and it starts on page 315. There are 4 different theories that get into group motivation and behavior. Those are expectancy theory, attribution theory, goal theory, and behaviorism. And what I want you to do in your smaller group is to take some time to explain what this theory is in your own words. Figure out sort of the nuts and bolts of this theory, what are its core assumptions and beliefs, and so on. And then secondarily, I want you to take some time to explain and write down and be prepared to share how this theory explains group motivation. And I want you to do so in as much detail as you can. What does this assume or suggest about how people would behave when they're in groups? So we've got 5 people that are here face to face, and we have how many on Zoom? Let's see. So we've got 8 people on Zoom. So what I'll do then is I'll have 2 groups that are here face to face. Then I'll also create 2 breakout rooms, have 2 Zoom folks. So let's do a 1, 2, have a pair here focus on expectancy theory. We'll have 1, 2, and 3 focus on attribution theory. We'll have in the first breakout room set up for you. The first breakout room will have Devin, Isabel, Josie, and Luli, who will focus on goal theory. And then the second breakout room, which has Ryan, Olivia, and I'm not sure who is listed as iPhone, will have this third person focus on behaviorism. So I'll go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Again, have one person who will write or type for your group and another person in your group who will share. Take some time to look through this and work together.
Okay. Yeah, I'll add the phone.
About 1:30, give you around 10 minutes or so. I'll be right back.
Simple? Yeah. Under expectancy?
Yes, expectancy.
Okay. So it's originated by. Okay. Has been broadened and broadened. Are motivated by other abilities. These complexes. we talk, or we act in a certain way if they
Yeah,
believe.
like we. So, like acting the way others would act, like acting
Motivated.
how you think others should act.
In
kind
a
of
certain
thing.
way, if they believe one, that they will
Yeah.
receive a reward. Or get by.
Acting.
Two, that the reward they expect to receive is something they value highly.
How does this do? Oh, let's see, let's see. So this says that, I feel like this is kind of saying that people might put more of an effort in just in general, because it's like, it says they will, they can even give significant rewards for someone's failure. So I feel like that would encourage a lot of people to just at least try, you know, like whether it would be right or not.
Yeah, I think that, or I think the example towards the bottom where it says if it's like perfectly done, the bus might not show as much of a reward because they're like, it was done perfectly. No reason to.
But they can do what it takes to achieve.
I'll just,
I just said it encourages your
So,
and there has to say them really want to go through their word or effort, just showing them their pride.
something.
Yeah,
Okay, just check.
I. Goal, yeah.
They're gonna get praise from their boss.
Explains that. Oh, getting praise.
And they have. in the way that makes sense.
Other things.
So I'll give you about 5 more minutes.
It's not a lot of. I don't know, diamond, do it seem like.
Pretty basic. I mean, then we vote for one or two things.
Yeah. Was originated by Victor Roman.
Or will. Or people.
That's the example.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how
Very basic example that works.
There's one other thing you talked about or was listed. It was something about their determination.
Yeah. There was something. I may have just said determination.
Basically, they're determined to complete the task
Yeah.
and to receive like a paycheck or
Something else. Do you just want to postpone?
Sure.
Thank you all. Let's figure out that. So I'll close the Zoom rooms here. So. All right, so it looks like we've got everybody back here and joining us. So let's hear from each group in regards to what this theory is and then the ways in which this theory can connect to group motivation. So let's start with the partnership up here on expectancy theory.
So expectancy theory is just basically the motivation or the idea that you have something in mind. There's a goal in a group that you're going to be able to achieve and get something out of it. So the example used on here was that you're in a group with employees and you have to present a PowerPoint to your boss, and they want praise out of their boss, knowing that they have the skills to present. So this fits in with group motivation because the idea that you're able to have high value in yourself and to have what it takes to achieve something together, you're gonna get something out of it. So.
Yeah,
I would also like to add on, it's almost like a way to prove yourself to like the group or improve yourself like to the boss and saying, yeah, I'm worthy of like this position. Or
Sure.
you can,
Yeah, both really good observations, right? So expectancy theory, as you all are kind of hitting on, really sort of deals with expectations. What do you believe will happen when you accomplish a task or do the thing that you're supposed to do, right? So the idea here being that, if you know that you are studying, or practicing, and cramming for an exam, that the expectation is you do well on the exam, right? So expectancy theory works because if we think back to some of the other ideas in the class, like uncertainty reduction theories, right? It's the idea that we like to have our relationships be predictable. We like to know that if we consistently study or practice or do what we need to do, that we'll do well, right? And get the feedback that we want to get. So one way to really help with motivation is in a group making sure that the expectations are clear and that people pretty consistently know what's going to happen, right? If you practiced and crammed every time for an exam and all of a sudden the exam covered material that was totally outside of what was supposed to be on the exam, started getting asked totally random questions that had nothing to do with the topic, you'd feel frustrated because it wouldn't match your expectations or hopes. So expectancy theory suggests we're highly motivated by these predictable patterns that create expectations for us on what we need to do to succeed, right? We feel powerless and helpless, and as a result, feel less motivated if those expectations don't line up in a consistent way. How about the trio here on attribution theory?
So attribution theory, we came up with is acting or behaving in a way that you expect others in the group to act.
Mhm.
And one of the examples on here was how they can sometimes have equal or even higher rewards for failure, the same as success.
Mhm.
And so that would encourage group motivation because it would encourage everyone to at least try, like whether it's right or wrong, you have a larger amount of the group at least putting effort into whatever you're working on.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, so attribution, right, deals with what we attribute or associate with something like group membership. So as you bring up, Kenna, right, the idea here is that at times, as we've talked about before, we look to the nonverbal communication and signals of other group members. If people are on their phones or pretty detached, seem pretty bored with the meeting, we might be less likely to be engaged ourselves, right? And similarly, if everybody's really animated and focused, we try to do the same. You can kind of think about this as almost like imposter syndrome, right? Where sometimes we feel like we're not really a member of the group. We're like an imposter. We don't belong here. And as a result, we try to like look to others in the group to see how we can fit in or behave, right? It's kind of like Among Us. So it's this idea here that again, we really look to participation and behavior, decorum, expectations among other group members, mirror that for ourselves, and that can be a really big aspect of group motivation. As we talked about earlier in regards to good group leadership, right? A good leader is somebody that sets an example for the group. So if the leader is active, engaged, asks questions, really participates, it motivates the other members of the group to put in a similar amount of effort and engagement that reflects the leader's behavior. So good observations there. Let's hear from the first Zoom group with regard to goal theory.
Goal theory is pretty much just a group of people creating a goal and they're all working towards it to hoping to achieve it. And the common goal in goal theory allows people to they all join together and work towards it, and it would motivate people because they would know that everyone else is also working towards the goal. So there's a better chance that it will be achieved and they're not just working towards nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So thanks for bringing that up, Al. I think there are some really good points here that you brought in regarding goal theory. So I'd imagine, depending on the activities or groups that you're part of, it's anything like I did, you might have like a whiteboard or like a Google Doc or something where you're all asked to like write down or share your goals or bring your goals forward to the group, and you all kind of put that together to merge group goals. So one way that groups can work really well, right, is setting aside both individual level goals and group level goals. So thinking back to the concerns that we had about groupthink, right, the idea here is that early on, you give people the opportunity to develop their own goals and some of the ways that they intend to reach them. For example, maybe you say, you know what, I want our team to win a national championship. I think we can do it. You're really excited about it, right? And after hearing to the group members, they say, oh, there's no way we can do that. Groupthink might cause you to lessen your own goals or try to align them more closely with the group and thus lose some of the motivation or hope you have. So having the opportunity to develop those individual level goals, things that you want to achieve, is important. And at the same time, as you mentioned, right, setting aside group goals is a really good way to ensure that the group is motivated, because one easy way for a group to feel off task is to not feel like you're working toward it. Doing things like meetings and participation is a means to an end, right? Meetings are a way that you can fulfill the goals or things that are important to you. Putting together agendas are really good ways to set aside goals. Also doing things such as having the opportunity to reiterate and make clear what the goals of the meeting are, right, is a way that you can help group members to feel included and involved, right? That's part of why beginning of every class, I like to list out what the sort of goals and things we're going to do in that day might be, to try to make it a little more clear what the goals for a class are and to help kind of guide you through that as well. So setting aside those goals and expectations is a really helpful way to make sure group members are included. Lastly, let's hear from the behaviorism. What stood out to you all?
So pretty much what this theory is about is that when a certain event, like an event triggers a reaction to something, it's uncontrolled and it's based on the situation that happened beforehand. We said, and usually so the situation happens, then you do your behavior and then you get rewarded for that. So it's all based off of the reward, and especially if you like that reward, then you're going to keep getting that, or you're going to continue to do that same behavior.
Yeah, and that helps us when we're thinking about group participation, because groups continue to do what works and what reinforces them. In fact, that can be a risk of being a drawback, right? When you're a part of a group and it feels like you are continuing to do something because it's worked in the past, but you're not adjusting to or changing based on the moment. Like you continued to have face-to-face meetings during COVID at all times, and people weren't able to participate in those meetings. So, the good end of this behaviorism approach is this idea that we're reinforced. Might think back again to like the classical conditioning, right? You ring the bell, the dog salivates because they expect food. B.F. Skinner, who comes from psychology, also put forth like the Skinner box, right? The rat that pushes the button gets the food when it pushes the button, right? And so continues to push the button because they know when there's the button push that I'll get food. So it's a way of trying to provide those relationships. If I talk to my boss once a week, then I know I'm going to get a raise or do well, right? Doing actions that we know have some type of outcome, and that we look to past patterns of behavior as an indicator of what we can do in the moment that would work well for us. So behaviorism, again, is really encouraging us to do behavior that's reinforced, that works well. So that can help us, but it can also create a repetitive pattern, right, where circumstances change and we're not responding to those changing conditions. You might think back to that Who Moved My Cheese example, right? The idea that we have to be able to be adaptable to changing situations. Just because behavior has reinforced us in the past doesn't mean that it'll work again in the same way in the future, right? You might put out a movie that's really successful, but if you put together sequels that are the exact same thing, you're going to get fewer and fewer people that enjoy them. So, all important ways to think about group behavior, motivation. I think all things that look at how we look at patterns, how we look at other members of the group as ways that we ourselves should participate, and how we should set goals that allow people in the group to work together effectively. So all useful skills for you to think about, and maybe to think about in terms of the groups that you observe and the ways in which your group that you observe uses motivation to help people in need. So to wrap up for today, we talked about group motivation and some of these different theories and approaches that you all discussed in groups, and what compels us to act and to participate and contribute to the group more broadly. Talked about this idea of intrinsic, internally motivated, externally motivated behavior. Helps us to understand why we act the way that we do in groups, and also that available resources, physical condition, and all of those things can constrain and impact the way that we behave in groups too. For next class on Friday, we'll be talking about some of the strategies that we can do to motivate and help keep ourselves motivated when we're working together in groups. And also the way that feedback, criticism, and so on can help us as we're working together in groups too. So go ahead and email or pass forward your attendance for today if you haven't done so already. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you all again for Friday's class. Have a good afternoon.